Hey, what's going on everybody? Today I'm going to be talking about why you need to budget and how it's changed my life. All right, but first, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to be making a video series on this whole thing, going into more detail and into more depth about how to be budgeting, how to be handling certain things like retirement, emergency funds, credit cards, all that stuff. And also, when you have a moment, I do appreciate if you smash that like button. And also, if you want, leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your struggles or your successes over budgeting down below in the comments. I'd really love to hear from you. But yeah, basically I'm going to be making a series on budgeting that should be hopefully immensely helpful to people. I'm going to be sharing my own experiences and how I've become successful in budgeting with my partner, and just hopefully get people onto more financial literacy with their own money. When people are more financially literate, then they will be more likely to succeed and they'll be more likely to be happy. So hopefully this series will help everybody. All right, so to start, I just wanted to give you a little background about myself and where I was before we started doing like personal budgeting. So before, I was like really stressed about money. Okay, so if this resonates with you, then good, because you'll know where I came from. I wasn't tracking anything. Like I kind of knew how much I made, like how much money I made, but in terms of spending, I didn't know shit about what I was doing. All right, so that because I didn't know that, and because I also had kind of an unhealthy relationship to money, I was just stressed out all the time. I was anxious all the time. Like if I wanted to get like a cheap dollar meal or something, it'd be stressful, because it just felt like I shouldn't be spending this money. Like this money should be saved, or this money should be spent on other things, not fast food. And, I just had this really unhealthy relationship with money. And so doing like impromptu spending was really stressful. With my wife, we would just be having like a good day, just chilling at home or whatever. And then she'll be like, hey, let's go out to eat tonight. And then just that simple sentence would like send anxiety down all over my body. All right. So I was not in a good place. And I knew that something had to be done. Like we both were thinking something had to be done here because this was not great. And on top of that, I had some pretty bad habits when it comes to money. So since I was so like conservative with spending, I would like not spend money on myself for like months, for a really long time. Like I wouldn't buy myself shit. There would be no forms of self-care. I would be very cheap about eating out. I'd be very cheap about other things. And then I do that for months, okay? And then after a long time, I get sick and tired of that. I just go buy like a big thing. A good example is several years ago, I was doing that. I was just being cheap with myself. And then I decided to buy a motorcycle. Or even more recently, maybe a couple years ago, I only started budgeting back in mid 2019, early 2019. So like a few years before that, I was also like basically getting bored with not doing anything for myself. So I decided to just switch out my car. And I sold my previous car. I bought a much more expensive car, which at the time seemed like a good idea, but now looking back on it, definitely was not a good idea. All right. I mean, I do enjoy the car now, but at the time it was just like it was not the time to be doing that shit. So I had these really bad habits. I would buy things that I may or may not be able to afford, and that was all because of boredom and being sick and tired of not taking care of myself. The problem here was like I just didn't know how much I could afford. I just had like this instinct, which was completely off, right? I had this instinct of what I should be doing, and so my instincts were just don't buy shit, you need to save money, and after a few months, okay, you should take care of yourself a little bit. But then my instincts were so off. I would buy some big ticket item, like I wouldn't buy little things here and there, just big ticket stuff. I just had some really bad habits around money. And so that's when we both, me and my wife, decided that we needed to do something here. Throughout our relationship, we tried different things. We tried Mint for budgeting. We tried using spreadsheets, and those can be decent tools if you use them correctly. Okay, so first I'll start with the spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are a good way to set your budget, a good way to track you know, how much you're making and how much you should be allocating to each category. But one really important thing about budgeting is, you know, continuous tracking. Like you set a budget for like $100 a month for eating out. You have to be able to track whether or not you've spent that $100 a month. So a spreadsheet would make that super complicated, or it would just wouldn't do it at all. You know, it would be like you set it for the month and you kind of look at it and that's it. You know, and that's honestly, that's not really helpful. You need to be tracking it constantly throughout the month, throughout the year, whatever. All right, so spreadsheets, like right now we still use a spreadsheet, but we use it in tandem with another software, which I'll go over later. There's also Mint, which is made by Intuit, which is the company that makes TurboTax. Mint, I think, could be a decent tool, and it's free. At least it was when I tried it. I don't know if it is now, but Mint, it could be a decent tool. It didn't work much for us. It didn't work well for us because it's more of a passive approach to budgeting. It's like a step up from doing spreadsheets, that's for sure. But you know, you set your budget in Mint and you link up all your accounts, your checking, your credit cards and stuff, so it can pull in your actual spending. But then what it does is it also just categorizes things for you, like it learns and categorizes things for you. So it's supposed to make it easy so you have to do less work. But I think for us, that really killed us, because having things more passive for us, it just means that we weren't looking at what we were actually doing. You know, we weren't conscious. We weren't actively looking at what we were doing. So that was hurting us in the end, and it ended up just being like a spreadsheet. You can also budget on paper, like just write down your budget and track that way. I'm sure there's ways you can do it with like a calendar. You know, like I've seen people do it and it's successful. Just that's not a route that we took, just because we were so like inclined to do things with and use technology. But I'm sure there's a lot of good ways you can do it with paper, just like probably good ways you can do it on like a spreadsheet on Excel. It just wasn't for us. All right, so basically I'm going to be showing you what worked for us, and you take it or leave it, but hopefully the concepts are there. So there's this program called You Need a Budget, and I'm going to be referring to that as YNAB. You know, You Need a Budget is what is working for us really well. Okay, it costs money. It's like $80 a year or something, but for us that's completely worth it. And you know, obviously we have a budget for the cost of the software in our budget. So what You Need a Budget does, it's kind of like Mint, where you set your budget every month. Like you have to set it every month. It's not rolling every month. Like you don't set it one time and it just rolls to the next continuously. Every month you have to set your budget. So what that does is it forces you to revisit it at least every month. And then when the transactions come through, like you link it to your checking and your credit cards and your savings and your investment accounts, when the transactions come through, you basically have to sit there and code them. All right, now some things it'll know automatically, but you still have to approve the transactions. Otherwise you'll have like a half-done budget. So what you have to do is you have to approve, either code and approve, or just approve the transactions, which forces you to look at everything that's going into your budget, every dollar being spent, which is huge, which is what I think is the main necessary component to successfully budgeting, is knowing exactly what you're spending and how you're spending at all times. So it took us a few months to really get used to doing things properly, or doing things that worked for us. But once we got the hang of it, I can't tell you how life-changing it's been. All right, so you know, I've been with my wife for a long time, like almost 10 years now. But up until we started using YNAB, our finances were like completely separate. So that was the first problem, okay? Because I had my checking account and credit card. She had hers, and we both had different philosophies over finances, over spending, that we never really talked about. You know, we vaguely knew what our philosophies were, but we never really talked about it in depth. So doing this forced us to collaborate, and it forced us, you know, to combine our finances, which makes things much easier. But also it forced us to align with our principles on what we should be spending, how we should be spending it, and all that stuff. All right. it really like took this massive weight off of our relationship. So now we can actually focus on other things rather than just being fucking stressed about finances all the time. And also it's been just much less stressful for a lot of reasons, all right? So remember when I first said that I would get stressed over eating McDonald's, or the thought of maybe eating McDonald's, or the thought of maybe eating out that night because I didn't know if we should be spending the money? Well, here, when you have a budget, it just makes that decision for you. You know, like if you have budgeted $100 a month for dining out, if your spouse is like, hey, let's go eat out, or let's go see a movie or something, you just look at the budget and say, hey, can we afford that this month? If you only spent like $10 so far, then yeah, you can. Let's go do it. And so it takes stress out. Your budget literally just makes the decision for you in terms of whether or not you should be doing something. So now we are both much more comfortable spending money on ourselves, spending money for things for our house. You know, like we're definitely not the most frugal people. Like I'm not gonna claim that. You know, I know like you follow Graham Stephan, his channel, he's like a millionaire and his budget is like $4,000 a month, you know, his expenses. Ours are much higher than that. So I'm not gonna say that we're frugal, but this is just basically just telling you like how much less stressful it is to have a budget. And after we started budgeting, after we mastered YNAB, our quality of life has increased. It seems like we spend more money on ourselves, but it is much less stressful. You know, like we're doing things that were self-care, like we were getting massages, and you know, I was taking singing lessons, like vocal lessons. We were doing therapy if we needed to, like all this stuff. We were actually taking care of ourselves, and it felt good doing it, and it felt really comfortable doing it. So after doing this, our quality of life just skyrocketed. And because there's no more stress from our finances, and because our quality of life is improving, our relationship improved a lot. Okay, like it just skyrocketed as well. I mean, I can't tell you like how good it is when your relationship is doing well, especially when there's no worries about finances. There's much less stress, because you know, chronic stress is a really terrible thing. It's been compared with like some of the worst diseases that you can get. If you're chronically stressed about something, or if you're just chronically stressed in general, you gotta get that shit figured out, because that's not good for you. So I can't tell you enough how much this has changed our lives. And I wanna put out a series to help all of you get into a better position, help all of you be able to do this on your own and have and live a better life. That's all I got for today. Thanks so much for joining me. And again, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel. And also please smash that like button. I'd really appreciate it. Stay tuned for more videos on this topic. I'm going to be going into more detail about all the things I talked about, and about how to use YNAB, or how we use our spreadsheet in tandem with YNAB. So stay tuned. I appreciate you guys, and take care.